Walking on a road that God has paved, with tiny footsteps next to ours, a promise whispered through the ages, a covenant that never fades. We're on the covenant trail, raising hearts that love and trust, from generation to generation, faithful, brave, and just.
Hi there, welcome to the Covenant Trail where ancient wisdom meets modern life. I am Vera, and today I'm going to take us back 4,000 years into a bustling market street in ancient Mesopotamia to uncover a story that could reshape how we parent in the age of smartphones, TikTok, Instagram, AI, and that endless scroll that we're all familiar with. I personally love story time, much like Jesus, who never missed an opportunity to use parables to teach us deeper truths. So just go ahead, grab a coffee or tea, settle in, and let's embark on a journey that starts in a very unlikely place but might very well end up in your living room. Now picture this. Imagine a sun-baked alley with oil lamps that are flickering, the clang of metal that are echoing as merchants hawk everything from copper bracelets to fragrant spices. If you're familiar with markets in Africa, that will not be a strange imagery, right? So just imagine you're in the middle of all this chaos, and in the middle of all that chaos stands Terah, a man named Terah, who is a respected craftsman that the Bible introduces to us in Genesis chapter 11. And what is his livelihood? Well, this man is an expert at shaping golden cows, stone idols, and all those little trinkets that people often cling to for protection. And by the way, this didn't just happen in Mesopotamia, but even nowadays too. Even in the age of AI, we still have trinkets that people cling to for protection. And beside this man Terah is a man named Abram, a younger than him, a younger man named Abram, who is there watching his father's skilled hands turn raw material into lifeless figures. Those golden cows that promise safety, but deliver nothing more than just gold medals. So imagine families that are crowding Terra's shop day in and day out because they put their trust in those idols rather than looking to the one who actually created the whole world, including the precious metals that these idols are made from. Now, that's a vivid picture of a culture that worships objects instead of the creator. And given the fact that in those ancient times, trades were often taught from father to son, I mean, it would be reasonable to expect Abraham to continue the idol making family business after his father's passing, right? Now, imagine after this thing repeating itself year after year after year after year, months after months after months, and weeks and days, then all of a sudden, one fateful night, as the city is asleep and the market is quiet, on a night that seems as ordinary as hundreds of nights before it, a voice suddenly cuts through the ordinary hum, and it just says, "Leave your country, leave your people and your father's house, and go to a land that I will show you." Now, I'm probably not doing a very good job imitating God's voice, but this was God speaking. I know I'm being a little bit dramatic, but you must agree with me that this was no casual invitation. Imagine Abram at that time, hearing this voice out of the silence of the night. How would you respond if you were the one? How would you respond to such a radical summons to abandon the very foundation of your identity? Without any recorded hesitation or argument, Abram steps out. The Bible doesn't record any hesitation in him. He stepped out of his father's shadow, not out of rebellion though, but because something deeper, something that he probably couldn't quite explain, tells him that a greater destiny awaits him. And how are we grateful that he obeyed? Now, fast forward a few chapters. This call happened in Genesis chapter 12. And as we move forward, fast forward a few chapters, we see that God gives Abraham a promise that still reverberates today. And what is that promise? You can find it in Genesis 18, verse 19, where God says, I have chosen him. That is talking about Abraham now. I have chosen him so that he would direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just. Now, this is the one verse that captures the heart of the Abrahamic covenant. It's not so much about wealth or political power, although Abraham did have both. He was a wealthy man and he exercised quite a bit of power. Not in terms of, they didn't have political structures as we know today, but he had influence, right, because of his wealth. Yet, this is not really the heart of this covenant that God made with him, but rather the heart of this covenant was about leadership that will ripple through generations. So Abraham became the patriarch of a lineage that will ultimately shape the moral and spiritual fabric of nations. Ask the Jews, right? As the Jews and the Palestinians and many in the Middle East right now who are descendants of Abraham. So this covenant was a contrast of love, of responsibility, and justice. So it was a call to guide a household, a tribe, and a people towards righteousness. So this is a call that God made out to a man. He called him into friendship with him. But we see here in Genesis chapter 18, verse 19, that the reason why God singled him out of the many men, hundreds and thousands of men that were in in Mesopotamia at that time was because he knew, as he says here in Genesis 18:19, that this one had a heart, right, for continuity of knowledge, for continuity of covenant. And he knew that if he could get Abraham, he would direct his children after him. He would direct his household after him. The knowledge that he would acquire from God would not die with him because he had a heart of of legacy. He had a heart to establish a legacy with all that was his, not just in terms of material wealth or material possession, but also knowledge and allegiance. In other words, if Abraham had continued the idol-making business of his father, he would have most likely made sure that his family and his household would continue to do the same. So now, why is this ancient story important to parents today? I mean, what is important about this story that happened thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago? To understand why this ancient story matters to parents today, we have to fast forward another 4 millennia to a world that now runs on smartphones, social media feeds, and an endless stream of information. Yet the core challenge remains. How do we raise children who choose the right path in the midst of all this noisy and often hostile culture? All we need to do is to take a short glance at the current statistics and we will quickly sober up. You know, anybody who still believes that all is well in the best of worlds will quickly sober up by taking a look at current statistics. For example, if we look at some of the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control in the US, the statistics about youth depression show us that as many as 1 in 5 teenagers reported a major depressive episode in 2023 alone. Right, that's 20% of adolescents, 20% of teenagers are suffering from depression. According to the same CDC data, suicide is the second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 24, which amounts to about 2,200 deaths annually in the US alone. And I would suspect that the data are not that much different in Europe and in other places. When it comes to bullying, bullying is a major plague, I would say. I mean, I know the word might be extreme, but it's something that's become way too prevalent. And the Department of Education reports that approximately 22% of high school students experience bullying on a weekly basis. Now, what about screen time? The Pew Research statistics report that teens spend over 7 hours a day on screens, different forms of screen, whether it's phone, whether it's tablet, whether it's computers, and that is linked to poor sleep and heightened anxiety. So this is only a partial portrait of a generation that is wrestling with isolation, right? We seem to be more connected through social media, but the human component of it, like it has been missing, is missing more and more. So we are now in a generation, we are now looking at raising a generation that is wrestling with isolation, wrestling with anxiety, and wrestling with a loss of purpose. So there's a real cry for intentional, for covenant-style parenting. And I doubt if there's ever been a time when a partnership with God to shepherd our children has been more urgent than now. Looking at these statistics, there's a cry for that. So the invitation that God gave to Abraham, I will submit to you, is an invitation that God is extending to each and every family, to each and every one of us. Each and every one of us who have children of our own, whether they are biological, whether they are adopted, whether they are spiritual children, whether they are nephews, whether they are nieces or children in the community. This is an invitation that God, I believe, is extending to every family. Just as in Genesis chapter 12, the Lord singled Abram out and he called him to a covenant walk with him, which will empower him to lead his household towards righteousness and impact generations. Today, that same invitation to covenant parenting is being extended to the whosoever of the earth. Whosoever. And that whosoever includes you, that whosoever includes me. So what does covenant parenting look like in practice? Now let's break it down into 4 actionable steps. And each of those steps is inspired by Abraham's journey. Now, when we talk about covenant parenting, we're talking about striving towards a lifestyle or a parenting style that involves at least 4 things. There might be other steps, but there are 4 things, actionable steps that we can take, right? In our search for that type of parenting where God is involved in our shepherding of the new generation. So the first one is a call to step out of modern idols. We see that that's the first thing. God told Abraham, get out. Get out of your country, get out of your father's house, get out. That was the first step. Why get out? Because remember, Abraham was the son of an idol maker, idol stealer, idol merchant. And there were consequences that were associated with that idolatry, not just worshipping the idols, but making them and selling them, making them available to others. So he was trading, right? He was trading and he was involved in profane worship. And how does that apply to us in our modern life? Because, I mean, God will not necessarily ask each and every parent, leave your spirit, leave your tongue. No. But it's definitely a call to step out of idols, out of modern idols. And this is probably the most difficult step because idolatry is such an insidious thing. You know, it's easy to identify the physical statues that the people used to bow down to as idols in the days of Abraham, or even, you know, in nowadays too. In some nations, the idols are physical, they're physical statues. So that's easy to identify. But do you know that for many of us, our idols are actually in our hearts? Those are harder to identify. They hide, they're sneakier. And whether it's a tech gadget, whether it's a person, or the worship of fame, perfection, or constant validation, we're surrounded by idols that distract us from deeper values. So, covenant parenting starts with recognizing those distractions and deliberately placing God at the center of family life. It takes intention, it takes effort, and it takes sacrifice. So that's the first call, the call to step out of modern idols. And the second step is to embrace a shared vision. Abraham did not walk alone. When he left at God's command, he took his wife, right? But later on, he had a son. So he carried his son along in this covenant that he had made with God. So Abraham did not walk alone. He had Sarah, Isaac, and later generations that walked beside him. And likewise, parenting thrives when spouses, grandparents, mentors, and the broader faith community unite around a common purpose, right? It's easier to raise children who love righteousness, mercy, and humility when we do it as a community or when we surround ourselves with like-minded people, right, who share a common purpose and a common vision and intention. So that's the second step, embrace a shared vision. Number 3, the third step is to model righteous choices daily, because children observe us more closely than any sermon. When we keep our promises, when we extend kindness to strangers, when we stand up against injustice, when we repent, when we have done wrong, when we show our frailty, not just for the sake of showing our frailty, but to show the power of God to extend mercy and to change and transform a man, when we allow God to work in us in front of our children. Even in the smallest moment, we plant seeds that grow into lifelong convictions. Most of the teaching actually doesn't happen in how do you call it, in structured setting when it comes to life lessons. Let me put it that way. I'm not talking about academic teaching now, because academic teaching, a lot of it happens in a structured environment in schools, but most life lessons are not really learned in a structured sermon type of environment. A lot of it happens just in daily life, because children, they actually copy what they see. They don't necessarily always do what we tell them. So they mostly learn by example or by impartation. Impartation is not something that is calculated. It's not something that is targeted, right? So we can tell them what to do, but they're going to most likely copy, mimic, or reproduce what they see, because they observe us more closely than any sermon. So the third actionable step in covenant parenting is to model righteous choices daily, or at least to strive to do so. And the fourth step is to speak hope into the future, because Abraham's covenant promised a nation, which was an seemingly impossible vision when Abraham and Sarah were past childbearing age. So for those who are familiar with the story of Abraham, and if you're not, I'll just give you a quick summary. Abraham, when he left his father's house and his country at God's command, he was already an adult, and he was an adult. He was married, but he didn't have any children. Incidentally, Terah, Abraham's father, himself did not have any children until at a quite advanced age. He was above the age of 70. When those before him, his own father, Sarah's father, grandfather, and those before him did not have any issue with childbearing. If we go back and read Genesis 11 and look a little bit at the genealogy of Abraham, we see that they were all having children at quite what we would call more common or normal or expected ages. But it's when the idol maker, the idol maker is mentioned in the genealogy, that all of a sudden barrenness becomes an issue. But that's a story for another day. the connection between idolatry and the possible connection, I would say, between idolatry and the fact that there were issues with childbearing, starting with Sarah. But anyway, Abraham left his father's house as an adult man, a married man, but he did not have any children. And God gave him a promise. God promised him a nation, which was seemingly impossible because he was already past the childbearing age. He left when he was he was already a senior citizen, he would say. And he didn't have a child until he clocked 100 years, and his wife Sarah clocked 90 years. So as parents, we can speak hope into our kids. Because Abraham held fast to that promise, and the Bible records that he did not waver. He was strong in faith. He believed what God said, and he believed the promise that God gave him. He believed what God said about his descendants, even though he did not even have one, even though he didn't have a son. He believed God, and God accounted it to him as righteousness, and he fulfilled his word. And he not only got a son, but he fathered multiple nations as God had promised. So likewise, that's something that we can mimic. That's something that we can mimic as parents, to speak hope into our kids' lives, to remind them that they belong to a story that is much larger than any setback or any cultural trend or any contradiction in their life. And why do I mention the cultural trend? Because the cultural trend in Abraham's day was the worship of idols. That's the environment that he was born in, that's the environment that he grew up in, and that's what he knew. But he received a call from God, a call to friendship with God, and a call to be a pace setter, a call to break out of the mold, a call to be different, a call to establish a new bloodline that will be founded on righteousness, a call to influence a household, generations, and nations. And he heeded that call. So that's the first step, to speak hope into the future of our children. Now, each of those steps, number one, let me just recap. First of all, it's a call to step out of modern idol, going back, what is covenant parenting. It's a call to step out of modern idols. It's a call to embrace a shared vision. Choose not to walk alone, but to walk along others that are united around a common purpose, which is to raise children who will love righteousness, who will love God, mercy, humility, and not just love righteousness, but hate evil as well. That will carry the light of God and fulfill the purpose and destiny. The third one is to model righteous justice daily, and fourth, to speak hope into the future of our children. To speak on the basis of covenant and not on the basis of what we see, because if we look at what we see, a lot of times we'll be tempted to speak negativity. But to follow the example of Abraham, when everything around him was contradicting what God said, he chose to believe God. And what he believed became reality. Right? So each of those steps mirrors the ancient call, but they are fully applicable to a family that is navigating today's digital landscape. Now, let's get back a little bit into the storytime mode for a minute. After listening to all that I shared, can you picture a family road trip? Now you have a GPS, which is a modern idol, incidentally. And that GPS is insisting on giving us the fastest route, rerouting the family through traffic snares and endless construction zone. Then the mother or the father, whomever is at the wheel of the car, is remembering Abraham's journey and decides to take the scenic back road. So the GPS is insisting, now take this fast route. Go through these traffic snares and endless construction zone. But the parent who is at the wheel decides to take the scenic back road. It may be slower and it may be a bit dusty, But that road is filled with such breathtaking views and unexpected stuff. And along the way, the kids discover hidden waterfalls. They learn to read old paper maps and they bond over shared stories. And when they finally arrive at their destination, the journey itself becomes the memory that will shape the character. So what's the lesson here? The lesson here is that it's not the quickest shortcut that will build lasting legacy, but rather it's the intentional and purposeful trek together. So it's the intentional and it's the purposeful work together that is going to build a lasting legacy. Abraham's journey was slow, but he's been gone for thousands and thousands of years, but his imprint on human history is still being felt. It's still being felt. The Jews and the Arabs, at least some of them, because there are different tribes among them, they still refer to themselves as the sons of Abraham. And if you're a Christian, or we believers, rich believers in Jesus Christ, we are the children of Abraham. The Bible calls us the children of Abraham by faith. So, to repeat, it's not the quickest shortcut that builds lasting legacy, but it's the intentional and purposeful trek together that does that. Let's look for the moments of teaching, the moments of sowing, the moments of planting, the moments of bonding during a journey of parenting that will shape the character of our children. To think covenant in daily events of life. That's what the Bible says when God was telling his people. Remember to teach all these things to your children. All these things that I have told you, teach them to your children when you are sitting down, when you are walking on the way. So it's in the course of daily life that these things happen. That the seeds of truth, the seeds of righteousness, the seeds of a spiritual nature that cannot die and that will bear fruit, that will be the character, that will be the conviction, that will be the feeling, that will be the values. That's when they are sown. And that's also the heart of covenant parenting, right? To not focus on the quickest shortcut to get things done. What do I mean? Okay, there may be techniques that you can use to quickly get a certain behavior, to quickly get a certain attitude, to quickly get a certain result out of our children. Just like this family that was using the GPS insisting on the fastest route to get to where they want to go. But the mom, remembering Abraham's journey, said, no. The other route, the scenic back road, which is God's way, maybe slower and maybe a bit dusty, but this is where our hearts, the hearts and the spirit and the soul are going to, and the character of our children and ourselves, incidentally also, by the way, are going to get shaped to build lasting legacy. Now, whether you're just embarking on the parenting journey as a new parent or you're a seasoned traveler, there are 4 truths that I want to leave us with in this short introduction. Number 1, that Abraham left a house of idols to answer a divine call. He left his father's house, not out of rebellion for his father, who, by the way, as the Bible said, died in Ur, but Abraham left a house of idols to answer a divine call. Number 2, the second truth is that God's covenant with him was about guiding generations towards righteousness and justice. So God is a generational God. That when God calls us into covenant with him, I would dare to say that it's never about us only. He will always have other people in mind. We are the tools, we are the weapons, we are the instrument, we are the vessels. that he chooses to affect others. And if you are called to parenting, whether you're just starting or you're a seasoned traveler, that's something to always remember. That God's covenant with Abraham is the same covenant that he wants to make with every one of us. And that covenant is about guiding generations towards righteousness and justice. The third truth that I would like us to remember is that today's statistics warn us that many youth are drifting, and they drift without guidance. And the fourth truth is that covenant parenting offers a timeless and powerful response to what is going on in our world. And it's a partnership with God to raise our children to impact their own worlds for good. Because guess what? If they are not taught to impact their own worlds for good, they are going to be impacted. And there's no saying whether the impact that they are going to come under is going to be for good or for bad, because there are many negative influences. So God's call to covenant parenting is for us to partner with Him, to raise our children to be the ones that will influence the world, to be the ones that will impact the world, to be the ones that will affect the world, and that they will do so for good. Now, my hope with this is to inspire you to step out of the familiar, to embrace the covenant mindset, and to lead the household on a journey that will echo Abraham's legacy. It's a journey that will transform lives and a journey that will point the next generation towards a future that is rooted in love, that is rooted in faith, and that is rooted in hope. Because many youth nowadays, they don't have hope. And we see that with the spread of depression and anxiety among them. And there's a cry in that generation for parents to arise, not just to shepherd your biological children, but as many as God will, place in your sphere of influence, to partner with Him to do this. Now, if this resonated with you, well, don't hesitate to like, subscribe, and leave a comment or share with anybody that you feel might be wrestling with modern parenting challenges. Well, you can also read the full Substack post that is linked in the description for more insights and practical resources. Until next time, keep walking the covenant trail and let your family's covenant be a beacon of hope in today's noisy world, because that's what is going to happen. When we embrace that covenant mindset and incorporate it in our parenting and in our family life, you become a light, you become a source of hope in today's noisy world. And as the Bible says, the knowledge of the glory of the Lord shall cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. It starts in our own hearts individually first, and our homes, and it extends from our homes to the rest of the world. May the Lord bless and keep you until next time. Bye.
Walking on a road that God has paved, with tiny footsteps next to ours, a promise whispered through the ages, a covenant that never fades. We're on the covenant trail, raising hearts that love and trust, from generation to generation, faithful, brave, and just.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.